Still away to. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We've got a couple of things we want to talk about today. Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday. What happened on Bloody Sunday? Well, you've seen the iconic images of then SNCC leader, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee leader, and John Lewis, and the iconic Hosea Williams, staffer to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, leading this march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, in which they were beaten by the police. Nonviolent march, responding to Jimmy Lee Jackson's call for the vote, a veteran who'd been killed by a white mob as he was trying to protect his grandmother. As Congressman Jonathan Jackson reminded us just a few minutes ago, of course, Congressman Jonathan Jackson is there with our father, Reverend Jesse Jackson, in Selma today, Sunday, March 5th, 2023. And we have got a tremendous panel with us today, Reverend Jackson and Congressman Jackson. We've got the esteemed President Emeritus of Bennett College for Women, the Dean of Ethnic Studies at Cal State Los Angeles, brilliant economist, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Of course, she has her own radio show on WPFW. We're going to be talking about that as well. We've got Dr. Bob Starks, political scientist, organizer, activist, educator, and professor, Northeastern Illinois University Center for Inner City Studies. Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist. In the next hour, we'll have Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Kevin Lampe. We've got Aaron Conley with us, of course, political consultant and organizer, and attorney Daryl Jones, who's down in Alabama as well, in Selma, Transformative Justice Coalition chair. So let's start with you, Reverend Jackson, as we look at voting rights, Bloody Sunday, and this consequential mayoral race here in Chicago. Everyone is talking about Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallis, who will be the mayor, two educators who approach education from very different perspectives, Reverend Jackson. So talk to us. Good morning. Wonderful hearing your voice.
Listen, preach the resurrection, do the crucifixion. So leave out the name of Miss Boynton, who was likewise, they Dr. King, Jose and Jennifer Front. They still have Miss Boynton because she's president of Dallas County, supposedly. She made it all happen.
She reached out to Dr. King, yes?
She came to this house Christmas time and they got a relationship with Reverend James Reed. And they ignited. So they really want to kill her. There's a very embarrassing picture of her dressed up over her head on the left showing. They sought to kill her. But she is the reason why Dr. King agreed to go to Selma family.
Amen. Jonathan Jackson, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, why does Bloody Sunday take on added significance to you as now a sitting member of the U.S. House of Representatives?
You know, it absolutely does. Well, it's been increasing now. I just feel more the weight, if you will, the responsibility of the history and the work that must continue, that must go forward. I was at the Equal Justice Initiative Museum yesterday in Montgomery, and you can't go there enough in my mind for the things you see and more you can capture. And I'm sitting in the reflection room, and I just was overwhelmed with tears of joy and also that of responsibility when I saw so many people on that wall anew that I've personally met and people that I've talked to that are friends of my mother and my father. And I saw even the late picture of Mr. Dr. Timuel Black on there, and I stood in for our father, Reverend Jackson, to eulogize him at the University of Chicago, and just saw so many people on that wall. And this is just another lap in this race that we have to run. And I can see our voting rights are under attack. There is a part of the Supreme Court of Mississippi, for example, is trying to carve out. It's a city in Jackson is the capital, and it's 83% African American. The Supreme Court of Mississippi, as we speak, is trying to create a separate jurisdiction just for the white residents in the capital city of Mississippi. When I see that in Buckhead, Georgia, that there's a white community that's trying to secede from the city of Atlanta that legislation was introduced. When I look and see what's happening in the state of Florida, it's coming in as a scapegoat to attack the AP courses in African American history, and what Governor DeSantis is doing there, what Sarah Huckabee is doing in Arkansas, and that the Supreme Court is now about to look at voting rights and redoing the map and taking seats away from Democrats and African Americans in the state of North Carolina and Alabama. There's a nationwide trend this year. And so it all starts with Selma. The progress that was made here, that those that were opposed to it have never stopped fighting it. And I think that's the rallying call that we have to fight and never forget. And I want to thank President Biden again for coming down here. He's putting a light on this right now, and that's amazing. It was 3 weeks ago I was in the White House at a screening for the movie Till. I want to thank the CEO of Amazon. Amazon did the right thing in keeping our history alive. And so there are good forces. We have to galvanize them, and corporations can do more, align themselves with the right side of history. And we have to continue to fight. What is our agenda? So I'm going to be talking about this more clearly. I got to spend more time with Dad. He understands, and Dr. Starks and Dr. Malveaux. And I want to do my part, and I need your help.
Amen. Attorney Darrell Jones, the Transformative Justice Coalition is down there, as you have been in so many places, the places that go unheralded. We would not have known about Ahmaud Arbery had it not been for the activism of you and Attorney Barbara Arnwine, really probably the preeminent voting rights advocate in the legal space in the United States today. Why are you in Selma today?
Well, Santana, good morning to you, and good morning to Reverend and everyone on the panel. We're in Selma today because, this really is the birthplace of the Voting Rights Act. And it's the Voting Rights Act today that's under attack. So we're here today to renew our commitment to the Voting Rights Act and to the fight for equal justice and to the fight for voting rights for all Americans. Interestingly, as we stand here in Selma today, and we'll be going over to Ground Memorial and to some of the other events that are going on. But as we're in Selma here today, the state of Alabama this past year has more people that were incarcerated and killed than anywhere else in the country. They had 300 inmates that were killed here in Alabama state prisons. They leave the country. And the number of people that were killed last year, they leave the country in the mistreatment of the inmates that are there, and their predominant inmate base of African Americans. Part of what has to happen comes from that Voting Rights Act, comes from the ability of the people of color to be able to elect representatives that can stand up for these types of issues. So when we're in Selma today, it's because of issues like that, that we come and stand here and we're in this fight. So, that in essence is what this fight is all about, and that's why we're still in Selma, still pushing forward and trying to be certain that that everyone's right to vote is protected.
Dr. Julian Malveaux, the significance of Bloody Sunday today, all these years later, as we look at African Americans who are, well, they certainly at this time, the big four cities are all headed by African Americans. We have more Black people in Congress than ever before. And yet, as Congressman Jackson just pointed out, you have in Jackson, Mississippi, and in Atlanta, whites trying to secede from majority Black populations.
So Bloody Sunday is so significant because it is an organized attack on our voting rights, just as there was back then. You saw people beaten, John Lewis beaten, and now people who have been posted, who are at the polls, basically collecting votes. You heard the sister talk about threats on her life, and take her to jail. So not a lot has changed, and not a lot has changed. And we have to be clear about that. We have to celebrate the progress that we've made, but at the same time, recommit ourselves to the resistance that we must provide, because this is ugly, this is evil, said Peter. I think Jonathan mentioned the Florida attack on AP. Well, I'm the dean of a college of ethnic studies, and basically, in Florida, everything we teach will be illegal. And so, and these attacks on us mean this is really an attack on people not wanting to know the truth. It's so good that we have this program, that we have Reverend Jackson, our living legacy, that we have folks like Roland Martin who basically are telling the story that other people don't tell. But do you think they're teaching Bloody Sunday in our KP-12 schools? They should be. but they probably aren't. And if they did, they probably did it in a way that we would never recognize. And so this Bloody Sunday just reminded us how much work we have to do. It also allows us to recommit ourselves to doing it.
Dr. Starks, your thoughts on Bloody Sunday today?
Well, it is very crucial that we let our children know. Many of our children don't even know what Bloody Sunday was all about. As your previous caller said, it is the place where that gave birth to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And we are sitting here today, as Congressman Jackson said, looking at states like Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, trying to push back on those Voting Rights Act and its consequences. We have to also look at gerrymandering, which is very, very positive and going on all over the country, from the west down to the south. In Illinois, of course, we have a very good voting rights law and practice, but we have to stand strong and stop this. And again, I hope that the President Biden will do everything he can to push the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in the Congress, and hopefully we can get it passed.
Dwight McKee.
Many ways, Bloody Sunday is our Lexington and Concord. It is where the shot was fired that was heard around the world. It was a prelude to liberation for us as a people. It only reminds me of our responsibility to our ancestors and our mothers and great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers who've been fighting the same fight since they're being taken over here on slave ships from Africa. This fight has been continual and consistent. And so it should be a fight in our DNA and our children's DNA that we're willing to put our lives on the line as they were willing to put their lives on the line for the liberation of our people.
Reverend Jackson, what do you want us to know today? We've got Greg Palast, who's with us from Europe. He has today available The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. You can download it for free, and he says it's a rainbow push friendly, church friendly version of, I guess we will not have profane language in it.
And it honors Reverend Jackson. So that's available free at gregpalast.com.
Stand by. We got Reverend. Fantastic. We got Reverend who's with Congressman Jonathan Jackson in Selma. Reverend Jackson.
Then again, let me say to you about in Chicago, when I have the right to vote, put it this way, we went from not voting to voting on Tuesday only. You go to work early, you leave late. You couldn't vote. It kept evolving. Now in Chicago, you can go to the vote unregistered, register one booth and vote the next. It's never easier. We're fighting for automatic registration for everybody, 18 and older. That's our goal. Everybody should have the right to vote and be registered to vote. It's come like a poll tax, so it's not going to expensive. But in Chicago, you at least can now take 100 people's polls, Julianne, and then register them and then vote at the same time. That's a major step forward. We're going that's an event over at the George Wallace Hall where they have the annual breakfast. We're receiving an honor that today.
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking at Tabernacle Church, where I've been introducing Jonathan to speak. Well, thank God for Jonathan. He made me feel so good. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Attorney Aaron Connolly, you have worked so hard on Congressman Jackson's campaign, and we have now elected the first Latina from the Midwest to the House of Representatives. You've been on Congresswoman Ramirez's campaign, and we're seeing our voting rights expand. At the same time, people are fighting to contract them.
Every day in the field still. And thank you to everyone who is honoring this important day in our history today. Thank you for being the living history that continues to talk to our children and make sure that they fully understand what was sacrificed, what's at stake, and that this battle is still going on. I'll tell you a real quick story, Santita, about my 9-year-old. We were driving downtown yesterday, heading to a couple organizing events, getting ready to launch a aldermanic runoff campaign. And John saw Paul Vallis's billboard and says, "Oh, that guy, he kind of looks like a bad guy. Who is that?" And so we got into the conversation about the mayor's race and Brandon Johnson, who thankfully he knows personally. And we started talking about Selma. And he said, "Well, Mom, that just kind of sounds like what happened to George Floyd, isn't it? Doesn't that still happen today?" And
wow.
I had to take a deep breath. And for him to make those connections unprompted and to recognize how much work we still have to do is profound.
But you know what? I would have to say this. Congressman Jackson, are you still with us here or have you left yet? Okay, I've got 2 minutes for you, literally. It's not unprompted because she's raising her son in the movement as we were raised in the movement. Congressman, you've got 90 seconds.
Well, let me say, I don't want to vilify an individual. I want to keep this at the issue level. And the issues is the question about whether or not we are going forward with privatization or the fight for public education is what's very important. The issue is where we're talking about increased safety in our neighborhoods, and what does that look like? Is that simply more police overtime, or is that investment in fully funded education with crimes that can be solved? Crime is an issue, but when we have 86% of the murders in the city of Chicago unsolved, that is a justice issue that we have to confront. And so there are many great officers out there that are working hard that need additional training and resources, and we need to solve crime. We both stand firmly on that. And the issue is, do we put more money into coaching than in early childhood development? What we're seeing now is our school system has been defunded, and it happened a long time ago. Our pension plan for our teachers has been defunded. And our police and our fire department, their pension plan has been turned around and defunded. So we have to look at a big picture here. I stand with Brandon Johnson for mayor. He has a long history of service, commitment, and he didn't get us to this point, but he can certainly lead us out of this crisis. This has been a cumulative effect. A lot of people have put this issue down the road, and here we are at the crossroads for the city of Chicago, and we have to turn this around and go the other way. These are young people that are now doing most of the heinous crimes. Where did it happen? There was a crime committed against them in their public school system. The bands were deconstructed. The pools were empty. The coaches were fired. I want us to fix this. And in the meantime, we have to put an end to crime on the street. No one's going to be soft on crime. Everyone has the right to feel safe. We're going to stand by those great officers that are working hard, and we're going to also stand by and protect the citizens of the city.
Mic drop on that. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson, talking about the Chicago mayoral race and Bloody Sunday, our voting rights. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a moment.
My Lord, he calls me, he calls me by. Your opinion counts.
Wow, Jonathan, you need to write that down.
That was great, Jonathan.
That's the mayoral pitch right there.
Absolutely. But Jonathan, can we push for Bloody Sunday to be a national holiday? Or
Oh, he's gone. He's already gone.
Oh, okay.
Gone. They have a church service to go to.
Okay.
And
That's a great idea, brother. Whoever said that, that is a great idea. It's one of the ways of making sure, just like Juneteenth and Dr. King's birthday, that our history is emblazoned.
Exactly.
But you know what? I think we're gonna first we must do that. As a child, or growing up, I never went to school on January 15th. Before it became a national holiday, it was a holiday in our home.
Exactly.
And within the movement, you just didn't go. And it's not that you slept late. No, we went to services. We talked about Dr. King on that day, learned about him. That's what Jewish people do. They don't wait for the government to regulate anything for them. They just go and say, you know what? This is God brought us through, slavery, and all and untold toils and snares. Now, what we're going to do is acknowledge it ourselves. They do it. They have their own school set up. We have to do that. Every synagogue, has a school attached to it.
Right, right.
Every one of
And I
our
like
churches has a ballroom. Hello.
Every church needs to have a Saturday school.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. And I like teaching.
What are they doing?
I'm sorry, honey.
We have retired teachers, retired black teachers. Give a day a week to some young people.
Oh, we saw that Nancy Coombs.
It's another for James.
It's another for I like to see David Jackson on a stamp, just like Christmas Backdrop is on the stamp. For listening.
Daryl.
Oh, okay.
He's in Alabama. I'm sorry, you guys keep talking. I'm about to come back up. I'm gonna have to isolate. I need to isolate what Jonathan said today.
And we need it, on TikTok. Because we have to get the socials.
Can I send it to you? Can you help us?
Want to get young people?
But Greg, can I send it to you and you have your people do something with that?
Absolutely.
Hold on. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We've been honored with Reverend Jesse Jackson, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, and Attorney Daryl Jones, chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. All three of them have had to leave because they are on their way to a church service. Indeed, President Joseph Biden will be speaking today in Selma, Alabama, acknowledging Bloody Sunday and the need for the securing of our voting rights today. Many people are saying that we need him to enact an executive action, which would only last through the course of his presidency, but we still need it. We need voting rights protections more than ever. And we need to look at the direction in which we are going to go. We're watching a part of Atlanta, an affluent majority white area that wants to secede from Atlanta, Buckhead. You see the same thing happening just all over the country. What's going on, everybody? What's going on? We got to talk about that. While we're making these strides forward, we are, every action merits an equal and opposite reaction. I've got two academicians on here who can affirm that. As we pivot back to you, Dr. Malveaux and Dr. Starks and Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist and attorney Aaron Connolly. Greg Palast is in Europe today. He has the brilliant documentary, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. It's a church-friendly edition. He calls it the Rainbow Push edition as he opens up with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We've got white areas trying to secede from majority black cities, Jackson, Mississippi, Atlanta, Georgia. Wow. And we have got the fight for voting rights. It seems, I don't think it's an accident that all of these issues are converging, Greg Palast, at this time.
In fact, I've been spending a lot of time in Georgia. And two things. When you talk about the split away of Buckhead, to try to secede from Atlanta. We already had that once already with the Sandy Springs pull away from Atlanta, which also undercuts the tax base. They don't want to pay the white suburbanites in Georgia. Many of them do not want to pay for the school system for Atlanta. They don't see it as their city, but they're not satisfied with just secession. This week, the Georgia legislature moved to remove all voting drop boxes in the entire state of Georgia. There will be no drop box at all in Georgia. The cut in drop boxes really, we almost lost Senator Warnock. We came very close, within a half a percentage point, because 1 million votes were lost because when I say lost, we had a drop of 1 million votes in the runoff for the Senate race because it was nearly impossible to use drop boxes or vote by mail, which is how the African American community took the state, helped the people take the state in 2020. So they are taking it away. They're not, and the fact that Reverend Warnock got reelected by squeaker, yes, but they're moving now to remove the drop boxes The law only affected originally Atlanta. They were only removed the drop boxes in Atlanta. Now you tell me that that is about race. That's not about protecting, voter integrity. That's about stopping people of color from simply casting a ballot. Like I say, I'm in Europe. Europeans are stunned, absolutely stunned, that when they look at the American news, what is this stuff where you stop people from voting, where you make it an obstacle course for voting, and especially when it's aimed at the Black and Hispanic and Asian American communities in Georgia and Florida. Very dangerous. We've had very good successes. If you see the film Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and as you say, it's at gregpalace.com for free this week, now and through the week, for a download. We took on, with Reverend Jackson and Rainbow Push, a purge system where people were losing 1.1 million people wrongly lost their vote through a system called cross-check. We defeated that. It's gone. But we can never rest. As the great Hank Sanders of Selma, Alabama said, you got to keep walking over that bridge. You're never done walking over the bridge. Because every time you have a victory, they try to take it away. But then we have another victory.
You're never done walking across the bridge. Does that sound familiar to you, Dwight McKee? You have been really working in this struggle. I've known you since I was a little girl. You were a teenager when you started working with Reverend Jackson. Of course, he was a youth pastor at Fellowship, but then you all went on to Breadbasket, and you were the youth division leader and all of that. It seems like the struggle just continues, Dwight McKee.
Well, it's because oppression never ends. The oppression continues. Is that the struggle matches the oppression? It is a real pathology that a lot of these people have in terms of their commitment to white superiority and white supremacy. We saw the same thing happen with Gary. Gary got a black mayor. Everybody, all the white people moved to Maryville and took all of their money down there. And so it's a real consistent strategy they use to maintain control, to maintain influence. I'm not against them succeeding. I think, though, that they should pay a tax to the state for found 20, 30, 40% for the land that they able to take from another people. They took the land from the Indians and prosper. And so if they want to succeed, yeah, go ahead. But leave us the goods and services that they utilize at our expense, and pay for the land and the goods and services they have access to, maybe 50%, 40 to 50%, and we'll call it a day. But you can't have it both ways. You can't have all of the benefits of the goods and services of the state and the various communities, and then you get a chance to keep all of your money and make all of your decisions. It really does not work that way.
I mean, your thoughts on this, Dr. Malveaux? Because now you have the additional, you and Dr. Starks, well, you're teaching at the university level, but it's like, how do you teach this? I mean, how do you teach history that's ahistorical? Please help me with that.
Teaching, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to strip reality from history. Because you have this sanitized fiction of what this country is about. They don't want anybody to be uncomfortable. And my line that everyone says that to be is, do you think enslavement was comfortable?
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Dr. Malveaux, that's what Paul Vallis, who is, the former CEO of the Chicago Public School System, he said that CRT, that teaching history as it actually happened, would make white kids feel uncomfortable. And it will give black children an excuse to not to succeed, not to work hard.
But that ought to be reason enough for people to vote for Brenda Johnson. I mean, that is so absurd. Do we teach? We teach Paul Revere rebelling against the British. It doesn't mean people in the United States are taking up arms against the British. We teach the war in 1812. We don't teach the Civil War properly. But the whole notion of what we teach and how we teach it is just repugnant because these are people who are afraid of the truth. But the other thing I want to just talk, piggyback on, the previous speaker talked about these places that want to withdraw from urban areas. The flip side of that is urban areas are becoming so much more attractive that young white folks, gentrifiers, are trying to come into our urban areas and push our people out. Washington, D.C. was chocolate city. Now it's chocolate chip. I mean, it went from 70% black to perhaps 45, 46% black. And
well, at least they will get statehood then, I guess.
We'll get statehood, we'll get a white mayor, et cetera, et cetera. But you look at other places, you look at what's happened here in Los Angeles, what the black community has been decimated, literally people being pushed out. Urban renewal is Negro removal. And all this gentrification is about removing people. The block that I live on in D.C., you know, when I moved on that block, it was probably about a third gay, about a third black, and a third other. Now, maybe there's 3 black people on the block, 3 black homeowners on the block. And basically, it's been taken over. Older people, and you know, we could talk about financial planning, et cetera. But there was one older lady on the block who she was renting. She'd been renting for 40 years, and then they doubled her rent, and she was on Social Security. She was not able, and she was a retired teacher. I mean, she had a little money, but she didn't have enough to absorb double rent, and so she was out. And there's so many other stories like that in the district, in Boston, parts of Boston, you name the city, and you see the gentrification. You see it in Chicago as well. And at the same time, you see people running their mouths about crime. Well, as your brother said, as our congressman said, the first crime was committed when we started attacking our children. You know, the second crime was committed when the crime against humanity. I walk down the streets in downtown D.C. and sometimes, downtown LA, I get my cities mixed up, you know. But I walk down the streets in downtown LA and the number of homeless people sleeping on the street. When did we decide that these human beings were not worth salvaging? We had no place to have them sleep. That even in the rain, it rained brutally last weekend. There were still people with their little tarts trying to stay warm on the street. And we have decided as a society that poverty is not a societal problem, but instead a personal problem. So if you're poor, there's something wrong with you, as opposed to something wrong with a society that produced you. Dr. King once said there are 40 million poor people in America. And you have to ask, and this was 1968, you have to ask yourself, what kind of society creates 40 million poor people? And that's the question we have to ask. What kind of society creates schools that are crumbling, creates all this poverty, creates homelessness? What kind of society? And the answer is that basically we're fracturing. And then while I certainly applaud all our political gains, I think Jonathan shared the 68 folks of the Congressional Black Caucus. You mentioned the black mayors, but you know, black mayors is like black mayors with their hands tied, black mayors without access and resources, black mayors who have hostile state legislatures, because the state legislatures often do the public policy. When President Biden sent money down to the states, how much do you think it trickled down to cities? That, you know, so we have an anti-urban bias, which is implicitly an anti-black people bias, because cities are blacker and browner and older and younger than the rest of the country. Repeat that: blacker, browner, older, and younger. And both our old and our young are very vulnerable.
I mean, how do we're looking at this election here, Attorney Erin Connolly. I mean, how do we wend our way through this? I mean, this anti-urban bias, this anti-black bias, which ends up trickling down to just anti-people bias. By the time you hit everybody, ask the people in East Palestine. These are white, working class, poor people. We're the canaries in the mine. It happens to black people first, Erin. But it's clear you've taught your son something. It didn't just come out the blue. He sees life from the bottom up, and that's something that you've taught him as you were taking him to learn how to become an advocate on the weekend.
has showed up for over the years, right? And I think what's interesting about Brandon's perspective, and many of the progressive folks running for city council, like Lori Torres Wood, like Jesse Fuentes, like Rosanna Rodriguez, they grew up in these neighborhoods. They have a diverse, whether that's coming from an immigrant family or struggles with poverty, understanding what it's like to deal with incarceration of family members. They're living the deep trauma of this country, surviving it, thriving in it, and becoming leaders in their community to make it better for everyone else. And we need that perspective. We need people that have been able to say, I believe in you because somebody believes in me. And I'm looking at these children in Chicago and their potential. And we look at another side of it, and they're looking at these children as potential criminals. And that is not how we move to a city and a nation that, you know, we can be proud of, that we can really build a future upon. So I'm really heartened to see the young activists showing up in this movement. And I think thanks to their elders, and I think being students of history, they really are digging in and asking these hard questions. And, you know, that requires some accountability in that process. And we have to have the courage as Americans to take that accountability for what we've done to each other, what we've taken from each other, the violence. And I think today on this anniversary, it's important for us to come together and pray and really, really hold ourselves and ask what that vision for the future looks like. But we can't do that without a true accounting of what has happened and what we've done and what we're doing now to perpetuate those systems still.
You know, I've got about 90 seconds before we go to break. Dr. Starks, what's next?
First of all, we have to admit nationally and internationally that this country was born in racism and has continued and is still present. And that's what the CRT is all about. And that's why the racists are so determined to eliminate it or hide it. But the reality is, as Dr. Malvo stated, there's no way you can look at American history and not look at the contributions, the agony, and the racism in this country that is still present. And of course, when we look at the whole issue of gentrification, the issue of people, white people who want to move out of the city and into to suburban areas, and also want to take their part of the city out of the major cities because African Americans and Hispanics are in the majority. That's all a part of the whole racist system that we have, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to disappear in any time soon. It's going to continue, so we have to fight harder.
Amen to that. We're going to get some closing thoughts from panel one, and we're going to, of course, continue this conversation as we talk about the mayoral race. Dwight McKee and Dr. Malvo and Aaron Connolly, Attorney Connolly, and Dr. Starks. We need to talk about that because, of course, this is intersecting, as you pointed out, Dr. Starks, with Bloody Sunday, and the runoff will be held on the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. There's some significance there, everybody, as we're fighting for our voting rights today. On Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson throughout the week, please call us at 773-FREEDOM, 773-FREEDOM. We will be having a mayoral debate. We want you to participate in that. It's going to be fantastic. Can't wait to talk with you today about our voting rights and about the Chicago mayoral election. It's corporatism versus populism, if you want to put it in a nutshell. Either way, someone is going to be mayor. What is it that you want? Even if you don't get who you want, how do you get what you're going to need? Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a minute.
Coming up, we'll have closing thoughts from Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Well, very good. This is Greg Pallas. I just want to remind you that Karen Bass did win the Los Angeles mayoral race up against a white Republican billionaire.
Billionaire, right.
Billionaire. So, you know, yes?
No, excuse me, Greg. I'm sorry. I just said he outspent her 10-1. And he thought he could buy that thing.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear that.
Oh, okay. Can you say it again, Dr. Malvo?
Sure, I said whatever his name was, the man who ran against Karen. He
Caruso,
outspent
yeah.
her 10-1. He outspent her 10-1. He had a huge contribution from the police unions, think Paul Vallis, but he outspent her 10-1, and integrity and street work, street heat really won the day.
That's an important lesson that we can overcome their cash. We got the people, they got the money, but it's an endless battle, and I think it's been since for several million years of human existence, them and us. As Santita said, it's now corporatism versus populism, but that's the battle, and that type of those alliances, progressive alliances, are going to carry the day in Los Angeles, and that's how you win.
Did you know that 90% of the maternal mortality in DC, they're Black?
Of course, that's been an issue. Your congressman from Chicago, Robin, forget her last name now.
Kelly.
Yeah,
Robin Kelly, yeah.
Been one of the great proponents of Black maternal health. Also, Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, also from the Chicago area. She had a series of bills called a Momnibus, like a mother's omnibus bill, where 10 bills really talk about, again, Black women's maternal health. Doctors don't pay attention to us no matter what our class is. So how would Serena Williams almost die from childbirth? Because they didn't pay attention to her. And there's a movie, Santita, you must see it if you haven't. It's called Aftershock. And it was done last year. Robin showed it at the Congressional Black Caucus in September. A very, very impactful film that really talks about 3 families where the mothers died in childbirth, and with their spouses or their partners and their children that were left behind. And in every case, these were situations where the doctors just didn't listen. After I saw that movie, I went to the restroom, and there was a sister there who was crying, and I said, "What's wrong?" She said the movie just reminded her of what had happened to her. She went to the doctor when she was in labor. They told her, "Oh, no, you're not in labor, go home." Well, now you know your body. She went home. Her husband said, "Let me go out and get you something to eat." In the 5 minutes or 10 that he was gone, she gave birth to her son on the bathroom floor because she could not stand up. And she was only very blessed that her husband, sensing, he said something's not right, came back home like 10 minutes later, and the baby was born. But they should have kept her. And they wouldn't. You know your body. If you say you're in labor, you're in labor. They sent her home. That's the state of both American healthcare, but also what's happening to Black women especially. It may happen to other women, but it's happening to Black women, as you said.
Ask Serena Williams, please.
Yeah.
They wouldn't pay attention to her in the hospital. Stand by. I'm going to give everybody a little under a minute. Say 30 seconds to give your closing thoughts.
Coming up in 10.
You're listening to Keep Hope Alive. We want to hear from you. Please email your questions
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody, stay tuned for the second hour of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson as we commemorate Bloody Sunday, the day, indeed, Dwight, you put it so brilliantly, our Lexington and Concord. And really, not just for Black people, for America. Were we going to be slave or free? Will we give everyone the right to vote, or just the oligarchy the right to vote? Just very quickly, Dwight McKee, Lexington and Concord.
Yes, and I like seeing Jackson's picture on the stamp, like Christopher Atkins picture on the stamp, who was a Black man that died for the revolution, for the freedom and the independence of the United States of America. He died for the freedom and independence of Black America, who was never grafted into that freedom that the Americans fought for and won. Ironically enough, it's very interesting that this election is taking place on Dr. King's death, the day of Dr. King's assassination, because the fact is, and you remember, Starks, the need for or the calling for a runoff was the result of the racism that came when Harold Washington was able to beat Daley, and because it was a split ticket in the white community. Right. And white people said that there would never be a situation again where a black man will be able to win because the white population is split. The racism is so insidious in this country of these people who, because of their skin color, absolutely certain that God has put them in charge. And through thievery and trickery and whatever, by any means necessary, they're going to stay in charge. Whether it's by hook or crook, the truth or lie. I always say that if Jesus said the truth will set you free, the only reason somebody don't want you to know the truth is because they don't want you to be free.
Well, the beauty is, as you did say on my show a little earlier this week, and I hope you all will join us on the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Dwight McKee said, Michelangelo gave us the Sistine Chapel and all these wonderful things that we've seen Europeans do. But when it comes to the pyramids, the aliens had to do it. You can't make this stuff up. Back with more Keep Hope Alive in just a few minutes. Stay right there, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Dwight, I had to put that out there on you. That is what you say you have.
That was great. I love that.
That was a great line.
Well, he's
That
not
was
well.
a very great line.
He's not well. Bless his heart. He tries.
I got that. Ain't nobody on this call well. Quite frankly.
And poor Aaron teaching her child to be crazy. Oh my gosh, this poor child. Every time you see Aaron has that little boy out on the picket lines. I said, whew, what is this? Well, this reminds me of me. And he's just out there. And
now, Aaron, if you lived in Texas, they would probably arrest you for child abuse.
Yes.
I know. I'm grateful that we live in Chicago now. We lived in Arizona for a little bit, and you know how it is out there.
Well, what's bothering me the most about some of this is some of these young people who are trans and these laws that are being passed against them, and then against their parents, and then against their parents.
Hold on, everybody, because please, no joke, because they try and take this child away from Aaron. They would. Stand by. They would.
Call toll free 1-866-594-HOPE. That's 1-866-594-4673. And now, for Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Hey.
Be not dismayed. Whatever betide, God will shaking of you.
Wow. That's right. On Bloody Sunday, Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. Reverend Jesse Jackson and Congressman Jonathan Jackson were with us a little bit earlier, as was attorney Daryl Jones of the Transformative Justice Coalition. They are in Selma, Alabama today, commemorating the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, named after a KKK member. Of course, we've seen the iconic images of then SNCC leader, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee leader, John Lewis, who later became the iconic Congressman, Hosea Williams, iconic staff member for SELC, working for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And of course, we think of C.T. Vivian, Reverend C.T. Vivian, who was beaten in the mouth to a bloody pulp by Sheriff Clark. And we think of Mrs. Amelia Boynton, who prompted Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King to come to Selma, Alabama. We think of Jimmy Lee Jackson, who's shielding his grandmother from a white mob, from the police, actually. We think of him losing his life, this veteran, trying to get the right to vote, having fought overseas for freedom, and he couldn't get it at home, having descended from slaves, from people who had been enslaved, who built this country. We think of Viola Liuzzo today. We think of her family, her 5 children she left behind with her husband. Her children struggle today. Indeed, as she watched the images of what happened on Bloody Sunday, she left her family only to return in death. Wow. Reverend James Reeb, who left his wife and daughter at home. Young white minister who decided, I can't sit here in Boston while my brothers and sisters are struggling in Selma, Alabama. We think of all of these martyrs. We think of these people for whom we have, we could never pay them enough, Greg Palast. Very quickly, you've got the best democracy money can buy. How can we see this? We can download this for free, but please help us to understand what we can do.
Put it for free, and if you want to show it in your church, we'll send you a DVD. If you go to gregpalast.com, if you don't see it right away, it will be up in a few minutes. It's a technical issue, but it is free all week. The best democracy money can buy, and it ends at the bridge at Selma. And I want to give a shout out to Linda Brown, the second youngest marcher who crossed the bridge on Bloody Sunday. She was beaten nearly to death. In fact, she wasn't put in an ambulance. She was put in a hearse to take her to the mortuary. And she suddenly sat up. Talk about a miracle. She sat up, bleeding, and ran back to the bridge to cross it again. Linda Brown. Story. And we actually have, believe it or not, in the film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, gregpalast.com, we actually have the picture of her being loaded into the hearse. We can do our little bit. We're not being asked to being beaten nearly into our grave. We're just asked to be diligent and continue to be focused to this work. It will not end, and we've had a lot of victories. It's not all darkness. Tremendous victories. That's why I like the phrase, keep hope alive.
Amen. Absolutely. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson as we talk about the Chicago mayoral election and our voting rights on this, the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Back in just a moment.
Six 594-HOPE. That's 1-866-5.
Okay, everyone, we can speak now. Do we have Kevin Lampe?
Yes, we do.
Kevin Lampe, Please don't get me into trouble with all my other friends today. Thank you. Oh, my word. Kevin Lampe, you're on with Dr. Julianne Malveaux, Dwight McKee, and Dr. Starks. You're still there, yes? No, he's not. Okay, I'm sorry. And Attorney Aaron Connolly.
I am humbled by this panel.
But I'm frightened by this panel. Why is that?
Good morning, Kevin Lampe. How are you? This is Erin.
Very well. Good to hear you.
You too. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on some of these endorsements that are coming out in this mayoral race.
It's interesting.
By the way, since we're talking about this Greg House, a quick note, since you were bringing up the issue of CRT, which is, it's about history and truth. And of course, there's a reason why these guys want to cover up history. Brian Kemp's family brought the first enslaved Africans to Georgia. He doesn't want that taught. Governor Abbott's family was crucial in bringing enslaved people into Texas. They don't want that taught. DeSantis' father maintained segregation in voting in Ohio into the 1970s in Youngstown. He doesn't want that taught.
Greg, let me really quickly, there is a difference between teaching about race and critical race theory. Critical race theory is a legal concept that is rarely taught until at least undergraduate, but usually in law school. It speaks to structures and the way structures reinforce racism. Ethnic studies, teaching about race, that's just teaching history. These folks have basically honed in on this phrase, critical race theory, and use it as a bludgeon to talk about anti-historical teaching. So I really, as a dean of a college of ethnic studies, not to throw that around, but I is. But from that perspective, I want people to distinguish critical race theory from the teaching about race, because they're not the same thing. Or the teaching of ethnic studies, or the teaching of African American history, which is American history. That's not critical race theory.
That's right. They've gotten away with a PR stunt here using this phrase, critical race theory, which is it's a very sophisticated discussion within law school. And instead they're using this phrase that sounds scary to the let's put it straight to the redneck Trumpsters. And I'm allowed to say that.
Well, I think though with the Trump supporters, it's a lot more nuanced than that, because I've watched his black numbers grow with black women and black men. I've watched his Hispanic numbers grow. There's, it's a Rorschach test whenever you support someone. And that's the only reason I back up on that, because I know some people who have sheepishly told me that they voted for President Trump. And it's because, and they told me because I wasn't going to beat them up, and I wanted to know why, what is it about him that appeals to you? And it's very interesting when you talk to them, he appealed. Some people say, he's the only president in recent memory who's pushed back against all these wars. And that is true. And, I think he's going to go to Washington and fight for me. I'm not saying that that's true, but that is, it's a lot more. And most of the people who voted for him were affluent white people. It was not poor white folks.
Yes.
So we need to get real about that. White people need to confess, and then you shall be healed. Stand by. Hey, everybody, it's Bloody Sunday, the commemoration of the march that led to the march from Selma to Montgomery. Of course, we had a march across Edmund Pettus Bridge, but was preceded by a march. Jimmy Lee Jackson was one of the participants in that march. And he was killed shielding his grandmother from harm by the police. Sound familiar? Oh my goodness. And then it was 3 marches actually, culminating in the Selma to Montgomery March. That, as Dwight McKee put it so brilliantly, it was the Lexington and Concord for freedom and liberty in the United States of America. For Black people, yes, but for everybody, because no one is free until everyone is free. Joining Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist, and attorney Aaron Connolly, brilliant organizer and activist, and of course, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, President Emeritus of the Bennett College for Women and the Dean of Ethnic Studies at Cal State Los Angeles. She also has her own show on WPFW well, you can hear it everywhere. When can we get your show, Dr. Malveaux?
Thanks for asking. I'm live on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern, and you can listen to it live on stream at WPFWFM.org. And if you go onto the station's website, you can also hear old programs.
Okay. All right, everybody. WPFW, go on and find Dr. Julianne Malveaux. And of course, we've got Kevin Lampe, a brilliant political organizer, political operative. Before we get to you, Kevin Lampe, as we really talk about this mayoral election here, Greg Palast, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. This is a documentary that we can just watch over and over and over again. It never loses its power. But you have a special offering of it at this time.
Yes. It's up for free, or it may take a few more minutes for the technical issue, but you will be able to go to gregpalast.com and get 4 free downloads all week. The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, the special Rainbow Push edition with Reverend Jackson opening the film. And and it ends at the bridge at Selma. You get to meet Linda Brown, the second youngest marcher, who I said, basically rose from the near death, literally jumped out of a hearse to go back over the bridge. You get to meet these people and the struggles we have today, great Hank Sanders and others in the film from Selma, but also the need to keep that march going over the bridge, that is to fight the vote suppressors. They have new tricks. They're trying to eliminate drop boxes, which the African American community, especially in Atlanta and in Florida, we're relying on. They're just trying to make it an obstacle course. We have to fight back. And we need to learn about these things and the victories too. And also this history, and then you get more also of history, which is important. The attack on history, which is the attack on truth. This so-called attack on what they misnamed critical race theory. It's history. And the history of Dr. King is inspiring not just to Black kids. It was inspiring to me in school, and it is an inspiration for America. And they're trying to take away this extraordinary history. And yes, does it make some people feel uncomfortable? I hope it does. Isn't that? History isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be honest. And that's what we need. And that's what we have to fight for. So go to gregpalast.com, get your copy of download for free, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, the special Rainbow Push edition.
Hey, everybody. Let's call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. Give us the 30,000-foot view of this election, Kevin Lampe, and even, go down to the weeds. But what are we looking at? We had 9 candidates. Now we have 2.
We have a stark choice now. There is one candidate that's moderate to right, and there's one candidate that is definitely progressive. And I think the people now will have the opportunity to set the direction for Chicago for the next 4 years, or possibly even 8 to 10 years, because this will have an effect on how we govern and how we look at government in Chicago. We have one candidate on one side who has been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, and then we have a candidate that comes out as an organizer for the Chicago Teachers Union. You couldn't get any starker contrast between these 2 candidates, and I think it's going to be important for everybody to understand who do they think is going to lead this city for the next 4 years and set the stage for the next generation.
Aaron Connolly, what do you see?
I mean, I agree with Kevin. I think the contrast is stark. I think we have a clear choice, and when we look at it through the lens of who is aligning with each candidate, who's going to show up for them, right? I think if you take a look at who is contributing to each campaign, that becomes a little clearer. You know, speaking of the best democracy money can buy, in Illinois municipal elections, there is now, again, no caps on donations in this race. So I encourage folks to go to Illinois Sunshine and take a look at the contributions and where the support is coming from for each of these candidates, and who those people are, what their interests are, which is often corporate, often privatization of schools, which we have a clear record of Paul Vallis privatizing and damaging schools in many large, diverse cities across this country. So the choice is clear. I'm an advocate for Brandon Johnson and his policies that I believe are more comprehensive and live in the reality of where our city is instead of creating divisions. And I think as a teacher, as someone who lives and is raising his family in the Austin neighborhood, I think Brandon has the skills of managing a complex budget and making progressive priorities real for families in Cook County as a commissioner. I think looking at the records and looking at where their money is coming from and who their friends are really create that clear difference. And we're going to see other folks, whether they're running for aldermen or our other elected officials. It'll be interesting to see who aligns with each candidate and really what that tells us about where their values are and whose money they're willing to accept, which is really who they're going to be making decisions for.
Well, Dwight McKee, we're watching a lot of, well, certainly middle class and affluent Black people line up behind Paul Vallis. What does that say?
Well, it says there's a level of confusion to me.
There's what?
Because
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you. You went out.
Confusion for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just the privatization of schools, it's the stratification of schools. Mm. And what happens is that you put in the cream of the crop out of the school system and concentrate them into 4, 5, 10 of specific schools at the expense of all the other schools in the city. And what that does is once you stratify that school system, it creates the value in its community and it devalues the community because now housing follows that because people want their kids in the best schools and investment follows that. But people invest in schools that work. And protection follows that because you're going to protect the cream of the crop. At the same time, you devalue the other schools, which ends up totally affecting the economy of that area because now you have the teachers out of work. You have those systems that support the schools, those schools out of work. Take the cream of the crop out of those schools, and now those schools become invested. And eventually, it justifies them closing those schools, which totally decapitates the community. And so it's not just privatizing the schools and make these public schools private. It is the dismemberment of communities that the middle class who support Vallis understands the consequences, even for them. At some point, it's going to affect property tax.
How would it impact those who feel that they have made it? How do you see this impacting them, as you put it?
I've made it temporarily, but now Paul is going to unmake it. And that's why I said that if they live in a school district now that don't have a special calling, is not one of the elite schools, then their property value is going to be devalued. And at some point, their communities will be gentrified. Their taxes, it has on anything is that they can say. And so to many, in many ways, become their own enemy because they are investing in a system that at some levels is going to decapitate them.
Dr. Malveaux, your thoughts?
Election and look at who's lining up behind who. I think the term, as you know, Santina, two of my favorite words of the world to use to describe things are predatory capitalism. Who's going to gain what from Mr. Vallis winning, as opposed to Brandon Smith? Who is up in too late because they might get a contract, might have an opportunity, might be one of his advisors. He's certainly going to have to find a multicultural set of advisors, which means some of these Black middle class people who are panting behind him basically have something to gain. They have something to gain also. Understand what predatory capitalism, extracting surplus value, some people have something to gain from our children being oppressed. When you have a progressive like Brandon who's coming in as a teacher, see, this is, as I think Kevin said earlier, you could not have a starker contrast. Someone supported by teachers unions, somebody supported by police unions. Let me ask anybody, what have police unions done for you lately? Let me tell you what they've done. They have protected police officers who have beaten Black people and other people. They have rallied around them. They have hired attorneys for them. What have teachers done for you? They have advocated for your children. So, while safety is a big issue, and we've talked about it before, I just think when you contrast the two, there's no contest if your mind, spirit, and policy are the right place. But never undermine or discount the fact that people often operate in their own interests, not in community interests. And so I look askance at these Black folks. I know some of them, and perhaps could consider them friends. But in terms of their politics, they're all wrong. And basically, the people of Chicago, the people like Erin, thank God for her, for organizing this, Erin and Kevin. They are the ones who are going to make it happen for us because we could not allow a predatory capitalist oligarch to run the city of Chicago.
I don't know what to say, Kevin. Where do you see this going? The election itself.
It was a very intentional act by Paul Vallis to put $100,100 to bust the caps. That's the minimum you need to do in order to open up the checkbooks of everybody across the country that supports his type of an agenda, privatization of schools, charter schools, and fighting against what Brendan Johnson has put together as a coalition of progressives in Chicago. Brendan Johnson did well across the city, and that was the secret. What I heard a lot of is that as Paul Vallis rose in the polls, people started to say, okay, we need to vote who has the best chance to beat Vallis. And then people started to almost rank choice vote themselves, and people voted for Johnson because they thought he was the one that had the best chance and needed to come in second in that race.
It does seem like something your people started thinking, Erin, and they started saying, okay, we've got 9 people. In fact, Chicago Magazine had an article where they said, you might love this person, you might love that person, but you need to vote for the person who you think can win. Did you see some of that happen too? I certainly did.
Yeah, I think in the last month, right, we saw folks looking at who has momentum, who is actually talking about the issues that they care about, who has, I think, the energy and strength in some of those debates to defend themselves in a way that was compelling. There was a lot of negative attacks and back and forth, and I think what we saw, and this was proven with the votes, was a weakened Mayor Lightfoot, who didn't have a strong enough base and wasn't really speaking to the issues in a way that resonated. We saw a late entrance for Congressman Chuy Garcia into the race. and you know, some of the attack ads landing from Mayor Lightfoot early on for him. But I think when we got to the end, you look at someone like Brandon Johnson, who is young, who has existed in county government and had a successful tenure there, who has been able to build a really strong coalition that has support from the Black community, from the Latino community, from those centers of power throughout the city in many different areas. And honestly, he had the most people going door to door and saying, this is why I support this guy. And Brandon Johnson has the ground game to make the difference. And as Greg Palast said, we have to fight the power of the money with the power of the people, and that is old school organizing. And Brandon's folks showed up in a way that these other campaigns did not have the same type of ground support.
And Greg Palast, that takes us back to the vote, which is something the best democracy money can buy really does show us. It shows us what happens when we show up. When we show up, we can show out and we can change things. How can we see the best democracy money can buy? I've got about a minute.
Okay, you can go to gregpalast.com. It's free today and all this week. GregPalast.com. gregpalast.com. Download it for free. It is, and if you want this to something to play at your church, we'll arrange for it. Just send me a note. It is a special Rainbow Push edition, which opens with the Reverend Jackson. It's great for a church, a school, and if someone says, "Oh, that's CRT," tell them it's the real history. It's not the baloney. And this is what we need to inspire us, because if we want to get into the streets, get people to vote, we have to have the right to vote.
Everybody, I want you to call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. Let's talk about the right to vote on Bloody Sunday's anniversary and the Chicago mayoral election. Who you got? Do you have Vallas? Do you have Brandon Johnson? I mean, really, it's anybody's race. Some people are saying that they see Paul Vallas topping out at 40%. I don't know if it's going to be that simple, because some people who might surprise you are supporting Paul Vallas, and they are African American. They're Black folks. So this is not just, even though he has done dog whistle politics, as some people have pointed out, some Black people have gone past that, Dwight McKee, and they've said, he's our guy. I've literally got 30 seconds.
Yeah, in minutes, I think I'm thinking their own self-interest. If they can get a job if he wins, or they think that they can get a contract if he wins. And so I don't think that they're through the community's impact. Because, I mean, what he's going to do is he's going to put the resources in the police department. He's going to put in and we're going to fill that with the street level. There's many of the same people who are going to endorse him. It's not looking at the unintended consequences of his policies. And so when their children and grandchildren are walking down the street, getting pulled over and harassed by the police, they're going to scratch their head.
Hey, absolutely. No, stay right there. Because that helped to stir another level of activism in Congressman Jonathan Jackson. When he was trying to open up one of his stores, they put him in the back of a car. And he was wondering if he was going to get home that night. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive in just a minute.
Your opinion counts. 1-866.
You were blowing your nose like you cold.
1-866-594-4673.
You guys make me mad. I'm sitting up here in this 50-degree place. Here's 2 degrees in here above zero. I'm dying in here. And you think it's nice and hot. Someone's calling in. Who's that? Jewel. Oh, Jewel from New York. Bless her heart. We love Jewel. Are you all still there?
I'm here.
You all can talk. We're on Facebook Live.
Yes. Okay. This is Greg Palast. I would love to pick up Robbie Ellis's and Congresswoman Crockett's.
Good morning.
We show vigilante at the Congressional Black Caucus.
I'm calling because
this is core to the fight over what's happening not only in Georgia but in
I'm not in Chicago, but I listen to
issue of smothering.
I follow Chicago news. I watch
pick that up.
we
should talk about that.
I prefer Brandon Johnson, number one. Number two, I'm scratching my head because I'm saying, why do people vote? They could register and vote on the same day.
You understand? That's a big
You know,
that's
just
a
as
big
we
luxury. You could go
showed,
and register and vote on the same day, and you didn't vote. I'm tight.
All right, hold on, Joe.
you know,
Let's get
thank
you
you,
later
sweetie.
on, okay?
Just as we showed Greg's movie just before the midterms, maybe the
Yeah.
best democracy money could buy might work just before the election on April 4th. Aaron, what do you think?
I was just thinking that. I think there's so much movement in the money coming into this runoff election, and we are seeing it almost immediately, and it's at every level of government. And I think it's definitely worth organizing a screening, and happy to help mobilize that. I think it's important for voters to be able to hear, and for our elected officials to talk about. And we've seen in the city of Chicago the need for new ethics regulations at the city level, at the state level. And, you know, we're about to start the ComEd trial this week. And that plays into the issues we're talking about, right? And the money behind who funds influence, who has the power, and who is paying for it.
Dwight, what do you think about that? Because, you know, we had a full
15
house
seconds.
just before the midterms. And, you know,
I think it's I think we need to see before the elections.
Yeah.
They're dealing.
well, let's see. I want to talk with you about it, Dwight and Aaron. Stand by, please. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We're doing a lot of talking about the things that we're going to do leading up to the April 4th mayoral election. It's the runoff. There were 9 candidates at the beginning of the week, but now there are 2. Kevin Lampe, Dr. Julian Malveaux, Greg Palast, gregpalast.com. Go there so that you can download for free The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, the Rainbow Push Edition, Dwight McKee, Attorney Aaron Connolly. I mean, there is a lot that we need to be doing, Dr. Malveaux. I mean, we need to, you came into working with Reverend Jesse Jackson and Mrs. Jackson, boy, oh boy, half a century ago. And, you know, organizing is something that you have to do all day, every day, something Dwight McKee understands so keenly, something that Attorney Aaron Connolly understands so keenly, Kevin Lampe, Greg Palast. You can't just register people during the election season.
You know, I was saying, Peter, voting is not the most you can do, it's the least you can do. So it's not just about registering voters and getting people out to vote. How do you keep them engaged after the voting occurs? Because the way we get trifling legislators, and it's a better word, the others call it trifling.
Thank you.
Is because people don't hold them accountable. I mean, they need to be at community meetings, and people need to demand that of them. If they can't do that, then you know what? Move on. This irrational loyalty to flawed candidates is something that the public has to break their addiction to. You know, you have people who are quote charismatic. That's how you got the Orange Man. He was charismatic but flawed, but horribly flawed. These Republicans, I was talking to a woman yesterday, an African American woman. She's a big church member, and she actually told me that she voted for the Orange Man because he cared about law and order. And I just really had to pray myself through that one. Because I don't even know why anybody would roll up on me and say that to me. You know, I didn't speak to my brother for a year. He said he voted for the Orange Man in 2016.
Well, I tell you why she did it. She did it because she was not alone. People are not telling the truth about how they are voting and how they feel. They're not. I mean, it's much more nuanced than we see and then we say. It really is.
So we're chatting about Black women, and then she said, I'd like to share with you. And I'm like, don't share it with me. When she said that, but here's the point. But she's swayed by the power of the Orange Man rhetoric. And many people were, and they're not listening to content. And I need Greg Palast to send me his info, because I'm going to try to get his film shown on campus. And and to talk about it more, because this is what we need to understand, is that democracy doesn't occur in a vacuum, and it can't occur in the dark. And you cannot make chicken salad out of chicken spit. In other words, you can not create democracy on the basically the foundation of corruption. I think I forgot, maybe it was Attorney Starks who said earlier, this nation was created on a foundation of corruption and racism and predatory. Poor whites were exploited, but now they forget that. The poor whites were exploited. Native people were almost obliterated. And they don't forget that. They know it all too acutely. But the fact is that when we talk about this, we've got to be very clear about the flaws in our political system, but also it's the best what we have, and we can fix it. I can almost anticipate Greg's film. So, Santita, if you would connect us offline, I would like to have an offline email exchange with her.
Oh, I would love for you to do that, because it's, we need to, because you need to show it at Cal State Los Angeles, and you need to talk about it, of course, on your own radio show. When can we hear you on the radio? I know we can go to WPFW.org and listen to your archives. Is it .com or .org?
.org.
Okay, WPFWFM.org, WPFWFM.org. Dr. Julianne Malveaux, when are you on the air live?
Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Means I love early mornings. Here I am with y'all. But I love early mornings. The day is new and the day is fresh. And my morning prayer is, Dear Lord, I ain't cussed nobody out. I have not done anything wrong. Thank you for this day. Please help me get out of bed.
That's a rich prayer. We just love Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Ooh, Dwight McKee. What do you make of this election, Dwight? Where do you see it going? In Chicago, there were 9, now there are 2. Now there's a corporatist, now there's a populist, and different people lining up with different folks for different reasons.
I think it's going to be based on turnout.
It's going to be based upon turnout, because you were going in and out. We just need to get you into a good spot, Dwight.
I think it's based on turnout. If we love people out,
hold on a second, Dwight. Are you on an earpiece? Oh, okay, there you go.
I think that it's going to be based on turnout. That if we can get enough young people out and mobilize, and if we can get them to assist the elders in the coming out, I think that Brandon can pull it out. I think that Vallis is. A lot of his votes came from early voting. And if we can offset that, I think we can win.
Okay, but what will it take?
Future of the city and the future of their families for the next 10 years is probably dependent on this election. We do have a major voter registration, voter turnout rally that we're putting together on the west side with Marshall Hatch and the Leadership Network and Reverend Al Sharpton. He's coming in, and some of the young rap guys, to try to really encourage people to come out and vote and talk about how consequential this election is.
So please bring it to the South Side too. We need it everywhere. And we need to go to the high schools, because that's where you have a lot of young 18-year-olds who could register and vote and participate in this election on April 4th. Let's go to Jewel from New York. Jewel, what's on your mind today? Thank you so much for calling, Jewel.
Good morning, Sunita. Can you hear me?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, okay. All right. Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I just want to say it's extremely important in Chicago that I don't care what you're doing. You can go and register and vote on the same day. That's a luxury. Okay, but the problem with the closing schools and the high crime, it's a perfect storm. I'm only begging my brothers and sisters to do one thing. Go out there, register, and vote, please. If you can't do it for nobody else, do it for me, because I'm watching news all the time. And if I was there, I would vote for Johnson, okay? Because you really need a change. You absolutely have to make a difference. I called it before when Georgia had a runoff. So I understand you're getting ready to have a runoff. Do me a favor, please. Really. Don't even sit down. Go register and vote. Because once you vote, you understand, whether you win or not, the person who takes that job has to listen to you. You understand? They have to meet your demands. They have to do something for the schools. They have to do something about the hospital. They have to do something to get some more black teachers in there to influence these children. You understand? We all know that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. We can't afford in 2023 to just sit down and get out. You know what kicked again. Come on, somebody help me, amen.
Amen. Well, I'm telling you, but she's feeling this. And you are in New York, but for you, this is New York, it's Chicago, it's Atlanta, it's Jackson, Mississippi. You feel Jewel just dropped, but it's amazing. She feels this very, very strongly, Dr. Malveaux, in New York. I mean, but we felt that way about Raphael Warnock. In Chicago. I mean, these are national elections for us. They mean much more. They mean as much to us in other cities as they do in the homes from which they're running.
There's an encroaching conservativeness that in our country, not encroaching, and it's here, but they become more bold. They're putting out these candidates with lots of money, basically to swap down progressive ideas. And so, yes, this is a national race in Chicago because it's the police versus the teachers. I mean, there are no nuances, but you could break it down to that. Police versus teachers. What do you care more about, your children or police? What have unions done for you lately? Police unions have suppressed you. Police unions have sued after somebody has beat somebody's behind on the street. They sued and said, they were afraid for their life. Give me a break.
Remarks.
And the flip side of it, of course, is a teachers union. So, I feel the system pain. Many of us who are nationally involved become very agitated when we see races like this because they happen over and over and over again.
Amen to that. I want you to call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. I mean, Aaron, this really is about everybody everywhere because it is. You have two educators running, Attorney Connolly, and but they approach education very differently, and I think approach governance very, very differently. One has a corporate model, one has a populist model. Why does that matter today?
Well, it matters today if you really take a look at what's happening in the schools of Chicago, right? My son was in Chicago public schools for a couple years, and unfortunately, he's not anymore because we don't live in the city. But I saw teachers, parents, communities rallying together to make sure that our kids had the best. And we were up against a lot. And depending on the neighborhood you're in, not everybody has a PTO that raises over $1 million to support the school. And that's what's needed to get the services and supplies that our kids deserve. Many schools in Chicago do not have librarians. They don't have school nurses. They don't have social workers. They don't have adequate facilities that are equipped and ADA compliant. They don't have water that is clean. Many of these buildings have lead pipes. I mean, these are basic necessities that our children are left without. And what it creates is a system where a school can be in the same neighborhood and have vastly different options for families. And it creates a system of stress. It creates a system where parents are driving kids to 3 different schools. And our families deserve better. We pay a lot to live in the city of Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. Folks are paying more in property taxes. Property tax bills are due right before the election. So look to see who supports those tax hikes and who is giving to candidates that also support those property tax hikes, right? Somebody's benefiting from that. So there's a lot of things at play right before this election. I hope folks really take a look at the records of both of these educators. And I think, there's a pattern of success with one and a pattern of failure with another. And the philosophy behind it is really about hope or over-regulation, doubling down on the status quo and basically trying the same failed formula, over and over again, and putting a new generation of Chicago's kids at risk. I mean, the kids that grew up in like 1995 when Paul Vallis was, quote unquote, reforming CPS, they can vote now and they remember.
I mean, Kevin Lampe, where do you see this race going? Do you see a high voter turnout? Yes, no, maybe. What can drive voters to the polls?
You know, the untold secret of all elections, it's about motivation, not persuasion. And so the key to these campaigns is who is going to do a better job at motivating voters and finding those motivated voters and getting them to the polls. I think in this particular category, this is where Brandon Johnson has the advantage, because as a community organizer himself, he understands what needs to be done at a grassroots level. And so that may be the magic formula in order to win this election, is that he knows what goes on. He knows what's done. His people that are working with him understand that, and they've come out aggressive out of the gate, but they also have to find their people and get them to the polls. And remember, we have an election season now, not election day. We have a voting season, not an election day. And so voting starts. We saw that shift. And what happened in the first leg of this race is that more people voted early, but it didn't increase the turnout. But more people contained their participation. And so we've got to register and we got to turn out. And that's what's going to make the difference. Let's find those motivated voters and get them to the polls.
Renee, very quickly. Got about a minute before we have to go to break. What's on your mind, Renee?
Oh, well, good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
My whole family supports Brandon, including my granddaughter who just turned 18. She voted for him too. But there are some people who have a strong dislike of the union. Some are even teachers. And these teachers wanted to know why the CTU was fighting for the needs of students and their families instead of the bread and butter issues of their pocketbooks. And some of those pocketbooks don't even live in Chicago. When they leave their schools, they go to the suburban areas. And they should probably get a job working in those areas and let us fight for our students and for the needs of the family. And some of those teachers are married to policemen, so there's a conflict between the union who's trying to stand up for people like Adam Toledo and people who are abused by the police, and between these people who say back to blue because they're married to the blue. I hope that we have a higher voter turnout in the areas like my area and others that had less than 25% of registered or eligible voters to come out and vote. I hope we can motivate them, and I hope people don't listen to the people who actually get paid to tell people to vote for the candidates who have all the money because they're backed by the corporations and stuff. And I hope people just look at the two choices, because the choices are clear. If you want to help people, if you want to help our not just schools, but people, homeless people, if you want to help people who might need mental health services, the choice is clear. You vote for the one who's not trying to privatize everybody.
Well, just very quickly, is there any way to get, I literally have 20 seconds. Is there any way to get these high school seniors registered to vote? I mean, can there be, 20 seconds.
Just like your father was doing. At Lindblom, they actually took the students to the polls at Lindblom Park so that they could vote on election day. We need to encourage more schools to do that.
Okay.
And
do you know what, Renee? Stay right here. I want you to work with us, because we should be getting our kids, and it should be nonpartisan. Kevin Lampe, we need to get our kids out to vote. Honestly, I want you to vote, because it's your country. It's your country, and the only way that you can really control it is to vote. Back with some closing thoughts. Hold on, I got a heart out, but we will be talking, because I'm gonna give you those closing thoughts on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Stay right there.
Coming up, we'll have closing thoughts.
We're on Facebook Live, though. Go on and say what you want to say. I'm sorry, I just had a heart out.
No, I just, taking a look at the age groups that voted. Voters 75 plus, more than 60,000 of them voted in the election. Voters 18 to 24, around 18,000 voted.
Wow.
So voters 75 plus were more than 3 times in numbers than 18 to 24-year-olds voting in this election.
So that's an organizing opportunity there. I mean, that's the
Yes.
organizing opportunity to try, if you could match the 18 plus group with the 70 plus group, then you have a much better chance for Brandon.
Absolutely, and that should be the goal. Is that's turnout among registered voters. And so there's such an opportunity to move forward. It's not just the registration; it's the motivation.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
And I guess in Chicago, you can register and vote on the same day.
Absolutely, on site.
That's amazing. That's a great, Kevin. That's just a great organizing opportunity. I hope y'all take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting point is we have that law because of a group called Chicago Votes, which is all people under the age of 24 that they didn't know they weren't supposed to do that, so they just went and did it.
Well, Trevor Gervais, our very, very dear friend. That's how I met Aaron Connolly. That was his baby, and we need
Democracy Coalition.
We need more of that. We need much more of that. Much more.
Well, I don't know Aaron, but I surely appreciate the perspective.
Well,
I appreciate your perspective
You'll see
too.
Aaron. Come to push. You'll see Aaron. Aaron's part of the family.
Thank you, Santita. I'm so happy to be.
Well, I run in and out of Chicago occasionally. So,
well, I hope you're at the convention this summer.
Oh, absolutely. Please. I'm the president of Push Excel. I can't not be there.
There we go. I will absolutely see you this summer then. That's the best time to come here anyway.
Okay, this group would be a wonderful group to have a very long dinner.
Oh, yeah, that would be fun.
Absolutely.
Well, y'all, while we're on break, somebody tell me something about Chicago, this election that I don't know. What I know is from talking to Jeanette Wilson and a couple other Chicago friends and reading the news. What am I missing?
I'm a believer that Vallis's number in the first stage of this is a ceiling, not a floor.
That makes me happy.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I've just seen
y'all
so
see
many.
I
like that perspective.
I clearly have strong opinions.
Well, I think there's also like a status quo versus new governance fear happening too. What we've seen that hasn't been as covered as much is there's been a lot of escalations and we see as a normal sabotage around election day. Mm-hmm. It's not just sign stealing at this point. People's phone lines are being cut, cars are being towed. There's some real shenanigans happening.
That's how we do
it's escalating. And especially among female candidates.
It's going to be 30
among female candidates.
It's going to be. They happen to Jonathan. They're going to be 30 seconds apiece for everybody. Greg, I'm gonna close out with you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Stand by.
Come up in 15.
But when you hear my voice, that means I gotta go.
Got it. Yes, ma'am.
Hard.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Hey, everybody. Closing thoughts on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson throughout the week. Go to 930 East 50th Street, Rainbow Push. We need volunteers. Go to rainbowpush.org. We need your membership. We need you to be involved, and we need you to get involved in the Chicago mayoral election. No matter where you are, get involved. You do have a stake in this election. 30 seconds for you, Attorney Aaron Connolly.
Well, there is ways you can get involved. If you are a former Chicagoan or an activist across the country that wants to help this progressive slate of folks get into city council and the fifth floor of, in the mayor's office. There's virtual phone banks you can help participate in. If you go to mobilize.com, you can take a look at some of the great candidates that are pushing for change and help us out in the field. We have amazing technology to connect communities throughout the country. And I'm excited to be part of that organizing for the next few weeks.
All right, Dr. Malveaux, 30 seconds.
I'm not going to take 30, I'm going to take 10. Vote, y'all. Just vote. Voting is not the most you can do, it's the least you can do. But if you can't even do your piece, something is wrong with you. Vote, follow Aaron, Santita, the other brothers lead in terms of getting involved.
Vote, y'all, from the MIT trained economist and the president emeritus of Bennett College for Women. I love it. WPFWFM.org. Follow Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Kevin Lampe.
This election will chart the course of the city for the next 4, at least, but even more so, probably the next 10 to 15 years. You can participate, you can show up and be a part of it. If you don't vote, you can't complain. And it is vital that you participate. But I will tell you for a fact that if you volunteer for whatever campaign you want, whether it's aldermanic or mayor, you will have an impact on your community that will stick with you and keep you more involved. But you are an active citizen, not just somebody sitting on the sidelines.
Dwight McKee, 30 seconds.
The irony of this being Bloody Sunday does not escape me. The irony of people getting beat in the head for the right to vote, as against it now you have to beat people in the head to get them to vote, is very telling. And that's why education is so important. And that's why you have to teach the children what the stakes are and who the price is paid to give them the right to vote. Because now these kids take for granted what other people gave their lives for 40 years ago.
Amen to that. Greg Palace, the last 30 seconds belong to you.
Okay, you can get right now today and all this week. Go to my Twitter account. There's a click and you can download the film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. It's a special Rainbow Push edition introduced by Reverend Jackson. That's The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. You'll laugh at the front, you'll cry at the end, but you'll get the story of voting in America and who's buying it and who's fighting back. Go to Greg_Palast on Twitter. Greg_PALAST.
Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit